The crowd is chanting, 80,000 voices unified in a single demand. They want blood. They want his blood. Darius Velnathar stands in the center of the grand arena of Kelthus, sand beneath his boots, the afternoon sun turning the white stone walls into a furnace. His left side is on fire. A broken rib, maybe two. Every breath feels like swallowing glass. Across from him, Prince Roderick Auransi raises his sword to the crowd, and they roar like a living thing. The prince is golden. Golden hair, golden armor, golden future. Everything about him screams royalty, and everything about Darius screams peasant. Torn leather vest, calloused hands, a borrowed sword that weighs too much. The announcer's voice booms across the arena. Commoner Darius Velnathar versus His Royal Highness Prince Roderick of House Auransi. And the crowd makes their choice. They always do. They pick the side they think is stronger. Dear viewer, they were wrong. RiseArc here, and this story, this saga of blood and crowns, and a boy who should never have stepped into that arena, is about to break every rule you thought you knew about power. Stay with me, because what happens in the next 45 minutes will change how you see every tournament arc you have ever watched. Hit subscribe, grab something to drink, and let us begin. Thornwall. A village so small it does not appear on any royal map. Tucked between the Iron Ridge Mountains and the Ashwood Forest, population 300 on a good year, 200 after a bad winter. This is where Darius Velnathar was born. Not in a castle, not in a mage tower, in a blacksmith's shed. On a night so cold his mother wrapped him in horse blankets because they could not afford wool. His father, Aldrich Velnathar, was the village smith, a quiet man with arms like tree trunks and a permanent burn scar across his left cheek. He made horseshoes, plow blades, and occasionally a sword for a passing merchant guard. Nothing fancy, nothing magical. Just iron and sweat and the ringing of hammer on anvil that Darius heard every single day of his childhood. His mother, Alara, died when he was 6. Fever took her in 3 days. Darius remembers her hands, soft, always warm, always smelling of bread flour. He remembers her singing while she worked. And he remembers the morning his father sat him down and said, in a voice that sounded like it came from the bottom of a well, "Your mother is gone, boy. It is just us now." But it was not just them. There was grandfather, old Brennan Velnathar. Except Darius never met him. Because old Brennan was taken by the King's Guard when Aldrich was still a teenager. Taken in the night. No trial, no explanation. The official record said treason. The village whispered other things. Aldrich never spoke of it, not once. When Darius asked, his father's face would close like a door slamming shut. Do not ask about your grandfather. Do not speak his name outside this house. That is all you need to know. The only thing left of Brennan was a medallion. Broken in half, the metal tarnished green with age. One side showed half of a crest that Darius could never identify. A wing, maybe, or a flame. The other half was lost. Aldrich kept it in a locked box beneath the forge. Darius found it when he was 12, sneaking around while his father slept. He held it up to the firelight and felt something. A warmth that had nothing to do with the flames. A pull, like the metal wanted to be closer to his chest. He put it back. He did not understand. He would not understand for years. Life in Thornwall was simple and brutal. Darius worked the forge from age 10. By 14, his arms were thick with muscle, his hands permanently darkened by soot. He could shape a horseshoe in 4 minutes flat. He could repair a cracked axle by feel alone. The village respected Aldrich, and by extension, tolerated Darius. But respect for a blacksmith is not the same as respect for a person. When the noble caravans passed through, and they passed through twice a year on the way to the capital, the guards would laugh at the village children, especially Darius. Soot-face, they called him, Ash Boy. One guard, a man in the livery of House Auransi, once knocked the bread from Darius's hands and said, Pick it up with your teeth, peasant. That is all you are good for. Darius picked up the bread. He did not fight. He was 15. The guard had a sword. But something burned in his chest that day. Not anger exactly, something older, something that whispered, "This is wrong. You are more than this." He ignored it. What else could he do? Now, dear viewer, let me tell you how a blacksmith's son ended up in the most prestigious fighting tournament in the Seven Kingdoms. Because it was not destiny, it was not prophecy, it was money. Specifically, the lack of it. The Tournament of Seven Kingdoms happens once every 5 years. It is held in Caelthis, the capital, and it draws fighters from every corner of the realm. Knights, mercenaries, mages, nobles playing at war. The prize is enormous. 10,000 gold crowns, a title of champion, and an audience with the king himself. But more importantly for our story, there are qualifying rounds, regional bouts held in every major town, and the regional bout nearest to Thornwall was in Millhaven, 3 days' ride south. Darius was 18 when the recruiters came through. Not recruiters for the tournament itself, recruiters for the warm bodies needed to fill the bracket. You see, the tournament requires 64 fighters in the regional round. 64. And Millhaven, being a farming town, rarely produced more than 40 volunteers. The rest were filled by anyone willing to sign a contract and take a hit for 2 silver coins per round. 2 silver coins. That was more than Aldrich made in a week at the forge. And the forge was failing. Iron prices had tripled since the northern mines closed. Aldrich was coughing blood in the mornings, though he tried to hide it. The roof leaked. Winter was coming. Darius looked at the recruiter's contract and saw something simple. Not glory, not destiny, survival. He signed his name. Darius Velnathar, fighter number 47, filler, cannon fodder, expected to lose in round 1 and go home with his 2 silver coins and a bruise. He did not lose in round 1. The man he faced was a drunk farmhand who swung a wooden practice sword like he was chopping firewood. Darius, who had spent 8 years hammering iron, who had arms that could bend horseshoes bare-handed, caught the swing on his forearm and put the man on his back with a single shove. The crowd barely noticed. 2 silver coins. Round 2, a merchant's bodyguard. Bigger than Darius, but slow. Darius remembered something his father once said about metalwork. The strongest steel is not the hardest, it is the one that bends without breaking. He let the bodyguard swing until the man was gasping, then stepped inside his guard and put him down with an elbow to the jaw. 4 silver coins. The crowd noticed this time. Round 3, a trained squire from a minor noble house. This one had real armor, a real sword, real training. Darius had a borrowed blade and leather that was more patches than original material. The squire was fast, precise, textbook. But textbook assumes your opponent fights like a person. Darius fought like a blacksmith. He used angles that made no sense to a trained swordsman. He struck at joints, at gaps, at the places where armor meets flesh. The squire went down in 4 minutes, 6 silver coins. And now people were talking. The regional coordinator, a fat man named Bertram who smelled of wine and corruption, pulled Darius aside after round 3. "You are not supposed to win, boy. You are filler." Darius looked at him. "I signed a contract for 2 coins per round. I have won 3 rounds. You owe me 6 coins. Bertram paid him, but his eyes were calculating. And the next morning, Darius found his name on the main tournament bracket, not as filler. As a qualified regional champion, Bertram had sold his contract to the capital organizers for 50 gold crowns. Darius Velnathar, blacksmith's son from Thornwall, was going to the Tournament of 7 Kingdoms. He sent the 6 silver coins home to his father with a note, "Going to the capital, back in a week, do not worry." He did not mention the tournament. Aldrich would have told him to come home, and Darius could not, because something was pulling him toward Caelthis. That same warmth he felt when he touched the broken medallion, that same whisper, "You are more than this." The capital was everything Thornwall was not. Towers of white stone that caught the sun and turned it into fire. Streets wider than the entire village square. People in silk and velvet and colors Darius had never seen outside of wildflowers. And everywhere, the crest of House Auransi, a golden sun rising over a crown. Darius saw it on banners, on shields, on the very cobblestones beneath his feet. And every time he saw it, that warmth in his chest pulsed, like a heartbeat that was not his own. The tournament grounds were a city within a city. The grand arena of Kelthus seated 80,000. 80,000. Darius had never seen more than 300 people in one place. The noise alone was enough to make his ears ring. And the fighters. Gods, the fighters. Knights in enchanted armor that glowed with protective runes. Mages who could summon fire from their fingertips, mercenaries with scars older than Darius himself, and him, a boy in borrowed leather with a sword that was slightly too heavy. His first opponent in the capital bracket was a knight from the western reaches, Sir Aldous Crane. Full plate armor, enchanted shield, 15 years of tournament experience. Darius should have lost. Everyone expected him to lose. The bookmakers gave him odds of 40-1. But Sir Aldous made a mistake. He underestimated the reach of a blacksmith's arms. Darius caught his sword mid-swing, twisted it out of his grip with raw strength that should not have been possible, and put the knight on his back with a headbutt that dented the man's visor. The crowd went silent. Then they erupted. Not in cheers, in confusion. Who was this peasant? Second capital round, a fire mage named Cassian Vex. This one was dangerous, real magic, real killing intent. Cassian threw a bolt of flame that scorched the sand where Darius had been standing a heartbeat before. Then another, then another. Darius ran, he dodged, he used the arena pillars as cover. The crowd booed. "Coward," they screamed, "fight like a man." But Darius was not running from fear. He was watching, counting. Every time Cassian threw fire, there was a pause. 2 seconds, like reloading a crossbow. On the 7th bolt, Darius sprinted, straight at the mage. Cassian's eyes went wide. He raised his hand for an 8th bolt. Darius was already there. One punch to the solar plexus. The mage folded like wet paper. The crowd did not know what to feel. Third capital round, and this is where everything changed. Because his opponent was not some random knight or mage, his opponent was announced with trumpets, with fanfare, with the entire royal box rising to their feet. His Royal Highness Prince Roderick Auransi, first son of King Aldrich III, champion of the last tournament, undefeated in 42 consecutive bouts, the Golden Prince, the future king, and he had specifically requested this match. Specifically requested the peasant from Thornwall, because Roderick did not like surprises, and a commoner winning 3 rounds in his tournament was a surprise that needed to be corrected, publicly, painfully. The arena fell silent when they faced each other, 80,000 people holding their breath. Roderick's armor was gold and white, enchanted with enough protective magic to stop a battering ram. His sword was Dawnfire, a royal heirloom that had been in the Auransi family for 200 years. His smile was the smile of a cat that has cornered a mouse. Darius had his borrowed sword, his leather vest, his calloused hands, and that warmth in his chest burning hotter than it ever had before. The fight lasted 4 minutes. Roderick was fast, trained since birth. Every strike was perfect, elegant, devastating. Darius blocked the first 3. The 4th caught his shoulder. The 5th opened a cut across his forearm. The 6th, a spinning strike that Darius never saw coming, connected with his left side. The crack of breaking ribs echoed across the silent arena. Darius went to one knee, blood in his mouth, fire in his chest. And the crowd found their voice. They chanted, "Kill the peasant! End the joke! Finish him!" Roderick raised dawnfire above his head. The blade caught the sunlight and blazed like a second sun. He looked down at Darius with something that was not quite contempt. It was worse. It was boredom. "You should not have come here, peasant," he said. "This is not your world." And he brought the sword down. What happened next, dear viewer, is the reason I am telling you this story. What happened next is the reason 80,000 people still cannot agree on what they saw. What happened next changed the Seven Kingdoms forever. The pain hit Darius like a wall of fire, not from the sword, from inside, from his chest, from his blood, from somewhere deeper than bone. The broken rib was not just broken. It was a key turning in a lock that had been sealed for 200 years. And when it turned, the lock opened. And what came out was not Darius Velnathar, son of a blacksmith. What came out was something older, something royal, something that had been waiting, sleeping, dreaming of this exact moment for 2 centuries. His eyes changed first, brown to gold, not a gradual shift, a flash, like someone lit a fire behind his irises. Then his skin. Faint lines appeared, tracing patterns across his arms, his neck, his face. Not tattoos, runes. Ancient runes in a language that had not been spoken since the founding of the kingdom. And then, above his head, light gathered, condensed, formed a shape that every single person in that arena recognized. A crown of pure golden light, hovering 3 inches above his black hair. The crown of the first king. The arena went silent. Not quiet, silent. 80,000 people stopped breathing at the same time, because they knew what that crown meant. Every child in the Seven Kingdoms grew up hearing the story. King Valon Auransi, the first king, the founder, the man who united 7 warring kingdoms under one banner 300 years ago. The man whose bloodline sat on the throne to this day. The man who, according to every history book, died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 92, passing the crown to his grandson, Prince Roderick I. But that was a lie. And the crown of light above Darius's head was the proof. Roderick's sword stopped. Not because the prince chose to stop it, because his arm would not move. His body, his blood, his very bones recognized what stood before him. The source, the origin, the root of every drop of royal blood in his veins. And his body did what 200 years of breeding had programmed it to do. It submitted. Prince Roderick Auransi, undefeated champion, future king, fell to his knees. His sword clattered to the sand, his head bowed, and he did not know why. His mind screamed at him to stand, to fight, to maintain his dignity. But his blood knew, his blood remembered. Darius stood. The pain was gone. The broken rib was gone. He looked down at his hands and saw the runes pulsing with golden light. He looked at the crown above his head and felt it, not as something foreign, as something returned, like putting on a coat you had forgotten you owned. And then the memories came, not all at once, in flashes. A throne room, a grandson's smile that did not reach his eyes, a cup of wine that tasted wrong, darkness, cold, and then nothing. Nothing for 200 years. Until a blacksmith's son took a hit to the ribs in a tournament he was never supposed to enter. The royal box erupted. King Roderick III was on his feet, his face the color of old parchment. The queen, Isolde, gripped the railing with white knuckles. The court mages were scrambling, casting detection spells, analysis spells, anything to explain what they were seeing. And in the stands, 80,000 people began to whisper, then to murmur, then to shout. The first king! It is the first king! He has returned! Now, dear viewer, let me pause here, because I need you to understand something about this world, about how power works in the Seven Kingdoms. The Auransi dynasty has ruled for 300 years. Their legitimacy comes from one thing and one thing only: blood. The blood of Velnathar Auransi, the first king conquered, united, and built. And every king since has ruled because they carry his blood, his divine right, his mandate. Now imagine what happens when the first king himself returns, not as a ghost, not as a legend, as a living, breathing 18-year-old boy with golden eyes and a crown of light. Every king who came after Velnathar is suddenly not the heir. They are the placeholder, the seat warmer, the pretender. If Velnathar lives, the current king has no claim. His children have no claim. His dynasty, which has ruled for 3 centuries, is built on a foundation that just walked back into the room and asked for its throne back. This is why Queen Isolde's face went white. This is why King Aldrich gripped his armrest until his knuckles cracked. This is not a peasant with a magic trick. This is an extinction-level event for their entire bloodline. But we are getting ahead of ourselves, because Darius did not know any of this yet. All he knew was that the pain was gone, his eyes were burning gold, and a prince was kneeling before him for reasons he could not explain. The crown of light flickered and faded, the runes on his skin dimmed, and Darius Velnathar, son of a blacksmith, collapsed face first into the sand of the grand arena, unconscious. The crowd erupted into chaos. He woke in a cell, not a dungeon exactly, a holding room beneath the arena, with stone walls and iron bars, and a single torch guttering in a bracket. His ribs did not hurt anymore. That was the first thing he noticed. The second thing was the woman sitting on the other side of the bars. She was perhaps 40, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back severely and eyes the color of a winter sky. She wore robes of deep blue with silver embroidery, court mage robes, but old ones, faded, with patches at the elbows. She was watching him the way a scholar watches a particularly interesting insect. "You are awake," she said. "Good. We do not have much time. My name is Lady Seraphina Voss. I was once the Royal Archmage. I was dismissed 6 years ago for asking questions the Crown did not want answered. Questions about the founding, about Velnathar, about how he really died." She leaned forward. "And now you have answered every single one of them." Darius sat up. His head was pounding. What happened to me? What was that light? Seraphina's expression softened slightly. That light, boy, was a royal awakening. It happens when the blood of Velnathar is activated by sufficient trauma. It has not happened in 200 years, because for 200 years, there has been no one with pure enough blood to trigger it. Until you. Darius shook his head. I am a blacksmith's son. My blood is iron and soot. Nothing royal about me. Seraphina reached through the bars and held up something that made Darius's breath catch. His medallion. The broken one from his father's locked box. How did you get that? He demanded. It was in your pocket when they brought you here, she said, and it is not broken, boy. It is half. The other half is in the royal vault, has been for 200 years. Together they form the seal of Velnathar, the personal crest of the first king, not the dynasty crest, his personal one, the one that was buried with him. Except he was not buried, was he? Before Darius could respond, footsteps echoed in the corridor, heavy boots, multiple sets. Seraphina stood quickly. They are coming to move you to the palace dungeon. The king wants you questioned, tortured, most likely, then executed quietly. I can get you out, but you must trust me completely. Do you understand? Darius looked at this stranger, this woman he had never met, offering him freedom in exchange for blind trust. And that warmth in his chest, that pull he had felt his entire life, said yes. He nodded. What happened next took 11 seconds. Seraphina pressed her palm against the lock and it dissolved. Not melted, dissolved like sugar and water. She grabbed his wrist and pulled him through a section of wall that was not actually wall, but an illusion so perfect that Darius's shoulder passed through solid-looking stone without resistance. They ran through a passage that smelled of old water and older secrets. Behind them, shouts, alarms, the sound of armored boots on stone. But Serafina knew these tunnels. She had built half of them during her years as Royal Archmage. They emerged 3 blocks from the arena, in an alley behind a tannery. The smell was horrific. The freedom was beautiful. Serafina had a safe house, a basement beneath an abandoned bookshop in the Copper District, the poorest quarter of Kelthis. It was cramped, dusty, and filled with books and scrolls and crystal spheres that hummed with stored magic. This is where she had spent 6 years researching, 6 years piecing together the truth about Velnathar Auransi's death. And now her research subject was sitting across from her, eating stale bread and looking confused. She told him everything. Not gently, not gradually. She told him like a scholar presenting findings, because that is what she was. 200 years ago, King Velnathar Auransi did not die peacefully in his sleep. He was poisoned by his own grandson, Prince Roderick. The poison was not ordinary. It was a magical compound that did not kill the body. It killed the soul's connection to the body. Velnath's consciousness was ripped from his flesh and cast into the cycle of reincarnation. But not naturally, forcefully, bound by a curse to forget, to be reborn weak, to never remember who he was. The perfect murder. Kill the king, keep the bloodline, erase the witness. But the curse had a flaw. It could not erase the blood itself. Velnath's soul would always be reborn into a body that carried his genetic signature. Diluted, yes, scattered through generations of common folk who never knew they carried royal blood, but present. And if that body ever experienced sufficient trauma, sufficient pain in the presence of royal magic, the seal would crack. The memories would begin to return. The crown would manifest. Darius stared at her. "You are telling me I am a dead king." Serafina shook her head. "I am telling you that you were a king 200 years ago. You were betrayed, cursed, and reborn. Your grandfather, the one who was taken by the King's Guard, he was likely identified as a carrier of the bloodline. They have been hunting Velnath's reincarnations for 2 centuries, killing them before they can awaken. Your grandfather was not executed for treason, he was executed for existing." The medallion. Darius pulled it from his pocket. "My father kept this hidden. He never told me what it was, because he did not know," Serafina said. "But his father knew, and his father before him. They passed it down as a warning and a promise. A warning that the crown would come for them, and a promise that someday the true king would return." Darius spent 3 weeks in that basement. 3 weeks of training, of learning, of having his entire understanding of himself dismantled and rebuilt. Serafina was not a gentle teacher. She was precise, demanding, and occasionally cruel in her honesty. "You are not special because you were a king," she told him on the second day. "You are special because you survived long enough to awaken. Now we must ensure you survive long enough to matter." The royal magic came to him like remembering a language he had spoken as a child. Not easy, but not foreign. His hands could shape golden light into barriers, into blades, into constructs that moved with his will. The runes on his skin appeared when he channeled power, mapping pathways that Serafina said corresponded to the original enchantments Velnathar had placed on himself 3 centuries ago. Self-reinforcing magic, a king's armor woven into his very flesh. But he could not use it publicly. Not yet. The moment he revealed himself, every soldier in the kingdom would be hunting him. So Serafina taught him to suppress it, to keep the gold from his eyes, the runes from his skin, the crown from manifesting. She taught him to be invisible again. A blacksmith's son. Nobody. And while she taught him magic, she also taught him truth. The history they do not write in books. How Aldrich I consolidated power after poisoning Velnathar, how he rewrote the histories, how he established the Blood Watch, a secret order whose sole purpose was to identify and eliminate anyone carrying Velnath's reincarnation signature, how every generation 1 or 2 people would be quietly disappeared, accidents, bandits, house fires, always in remote villages, always people who would not be missed. "Like my grandfather," Darius said. "Like your grandfather," Serafina confirmed. During those 3 weeks, Darius also worked. He could not stay hidden in a basement forever, and he needed money. Serafina arranged for him to work as a smith's apprentice in the copper district. A cover identity. Different name, different hair, soot on his face to change his features. The work was familiar, comforting even. The ring of hammer on iron, the heat of the forge, the satisfaction of shaping metal into something useful. But now, when he worked, he could feel the difference. His strikes were stronger. His eye for flaws in the metal was supernatural. He could sense the crystalline structure of iron the way a musician hears individual notes in a chord. Royal magic, bleeding into mundane skill. The other apprentices noticed, not the magic, just the results. The new boy was impossibly good, impossibly fast. The master smith, a gruff man named Torben, watched Darius work for 3 days and then doubled his pay without being asked. "You have a gift, boy," Torben said. "Whoever trained you was a master." Darius smiled and said nothing. His trainer had been himself, 300 years ago, when he forged the first crown of the 7 kingdoms with his own hands. But the palace was not idle. Prince Roderick had recovered from his involuntary genuflection with a fury that shook the court. He did not understand why he had knelt. His body had betrayed him, and for a warrior prince, that was unforgivable. He wanted the peasant found, wanted him brought back, wanted to prove, publicly, that whatever had happened in the arena was a trick, a spell, an attack on the royal family. The king agreed, but for different reasons. King Aldrich III knew exactly what that golden crown meant. His family had spent 200 years making sure it never appeared, and now it had, in front of 80,000 witnesses. The Blood Watch was activated. Every agent, every informant, every asset in the capital was tasked with one objective: find the boy with golden eyes. It was Roderick who made the first move against Darius publicly, not by finding him, by framing him. 3 weeks after the arena incident, a royal artifact went missing from the palace vault. The Scepter of Dawn, a ceremonial piece said to have been crafted by Velon himself. The palace announced that the peasant fighter, Darius Velnathar, had stolen it during his escape. A bounty was posted, 10,000 gold crowns, dead or alive. Every mercenary, every bounty hunter, every desperate soul in the 7 kingdoms was now looking for him. Serafina heard the news from her network of informants, former colleagues who still every tunnel, every grate, every forgotten passage beneath the city. They emerged outside the walls at dawn, covered in filth but free. The road ahead led into the Ashwood Forest. Then the wildlands beyond, territory where the king's law grew thin and the Blood Watch had fewer eyes. Darius carried his borrowed sword, his broken medallion, and 3 weeks of magical training. Serafina carried her research, her contacts, and 20 years of questions that finally had answers. They walked for 2 days before they met Cale Thornwood, or rather, before Cale found them. He appeared on the road ahead like a ghost materializing from morning mist. Tall, lean, with a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, and eyes that had seen too much death to be surprised by anything. He wore battered armor with no insignia, and carried a sword that was clearly too fine for a common bandit. Former Knight of the Crown, Serafina said by way of introduction, dismissed for refusing to execute a family of farmers suspected of harboring a Velon carrier. Cale looked at Darius, looked at his eyes, which flickered gold for just a moment before Darius suppressed it. "So it is true," Cale said. His voice was rough, like gravel in a riverbed. "The first king walks again." He drew his sword, not in threat, in salute. The old salute, the one from before Aldrich rewrote the military codes, blade vertical before the face, then swept down and to the side. "I served the crown for 15 years, Cale said. "The real crown, not the stolen one. If you will have me, I will serve again." Darius did not know what to say. He was 18. 3 months ago, he was making horseshoes. Now a knight was swearing fealty to him in the middle of a forest road. He looked at Serafina. She nodded slightly. He looked back at Kale. "I do not want servants," Darius said. "I do not want subjects. I want allies. People who fight beside me, not behind me. Can you do that?" Kale's scarred face cracked into something that might have been a smile. That is exactly what the histories say Velon said to his first companions 300 years ago, on a road very much like this one. "Yes, I can do that." 3 became 4 on the 5th day. They found her in a cage, a wooden cage on a slaver's wagon, abandoned on the roadside when the horse threw a shoe and the slaver decided one girl was not worth the delay. She was perhaps 16, with hair the color of autumn leaves and hands that glowed faintly green when she was frightened, which she was, extremely. Mira Ashford, healer. Rare gift, dangerous to possess in a kingdom where magical talent was registered and controlled by the crown. Unregistered mages were property of the state, which meant, in practice, they were slaves. Kale broke the cage with 3 strikes of his sword. Seraphina wrapped the girl in a cloak. Darius offered her water and said nothing about the green glow in her hands. He understood, better than anyone, what it meant to have a power you did not ask for and could not safely reveal. Mira did not speak for the first day. On the second day, she healed a cut on Darius's hand without being asked. Her magic flowed into him, and he felt it resonate with his own, like 2 instruments playing the same note. She looked up at him with wide eyes. "You are like me," she whispered. "But more, so much more. What are you?" "I am still figuring that out," Darius said. 4 became 5 when they reached the edge of the wildlands and found Oren Blackthorn waiting for them. Waiting, specifically. As if he had known they were coming. Which, as it turned out, he had. Oren was old, not elderly, ancient. His skin was like parchment, his eyes like faded ink, his hands like the roots of a very old tree. He was a keeper, a member of an order so old it predated the kingdom itself. The keepers of the first record. Historians who remembered what others were forced to forget. "I have been waiting for you," Oren said, looking directly at Darius. "For 147 years. I was 23 when I took my oath. My predecessor waited 60 years before me, and his predecessor waited before that. We have kept the truth alive for 2 centuries, waiting for the day the first king would return." He held up a crystal sphere that pulsed with inner light. "And now you are here, and I can finally show you what they took from you." The ruins of the first throne were 3 days deeper into the wildlands, a place that appeared on no map, protected by enchantments so old they had become part of the landscape itself. Trees grew in patterns that confused the eye. Streams flowed uphill. The very air tasted of ancient magic. At the center stood what remained of Velon's original seat of power, before Kael'thas, before the Grand Palace, before the dynasty. This was where it all began, a circle of standing stones around a throne carved from a single piece of obsidian. And embedded in the throne's armrest, a crystal, the memory crystal, the record of everything. Oren guided Darius to the throne. "Sit," he said, "and remember." Darius sat. The crystal pulsed, and the world dissolved. He was Velon. Not remembering being Velon, being him. Feeling his thoughts, his emotions, his memories as if they were happening now. He felt the weight of the crown on his head, the pride of uniting 7 warring kingdoms, the love for his people, the trust in his family, and then the dinner. His grandson Aldrich smiling across the table, the wine that tasted slightly bitter, the sudden weakness in his limbs, the horror of realization, the betrayal. Aldrich's smile never changing as Velon collapsed, the words spoken softly as darkness closed in. "You were a great king, grandfather, but your time is over. The kingdom needs youth, needs ambition, needs me." And then the curse. Not death, worse than death, being ripped from his own body while still conscious. Feeling his soul torn free and cast into the void. The last thing he saw was Aldrich placing the crown on his own head and smiling. Darius came back to himself screaming, tears on his face, rage in his chest. 200 years of stolen life, 200 years of being hunted, killed, reborn, and hunted again. His family, his legacy, his kingdom, all stolen by a grandson he had loved. He stood from the throne, and the golden light exploded from him, not controlled, not suppressed, raw, primal, furious. The standing stones cracked, the ground shook. Kale drew his sword instinctively. Mira threw up a healing barrier. Serafina shouted something he could not hear over the roaring in his ears. And then Auran was there, old hands on his shoulders, a voice like calm water. You have every right to rage, my king, but rage without purpose is just destruction. And you were never a destroyer. You were a builder. Remember that. Remember who you were, not what was done to you. Darius breathed. The light dimmed. The shaking stopped. He looked at his hands, golden runes pulsing, then fading. He looked at his companions. Kale, sword drawn, ready to fight or die. Mira, barrier raised, eyes wide, but not afraid. Serafina, calculating, already planning the next move. Auran, calm, patient, waiting. I remember, Darius said. His voice was different now, deeper, older, carrying the weight of 3 centuries. I remember everything, and I know what I need to do. But first, he looked at Auran. The sword, where is it? Auran smiled, the smile of a man who has waited 147 years for this exact question. He reached into the base of the throne and withdrew a blade wrapped in cloth that had not decayed in 2 centuries. The Sword of Dawn. Not Dawnfire, the copy that Roderick carried, the original. The blade Velon forged with his own hands on the day he united the kingdoms. It sang when Darius touched it. A clear, pure note that echoed off the standing stones and made the crystal pulse in response. The blade knew its master. After 200 years, it was home. They returned to civilization with purpose. Serafina's network of informants reported that Lady Serafina Voss had been declared a traitor. Wanted for aiding the fugitive Darius Velnathar. Wanted for theft of royal secrets. Wanted dead, preferably. The bounty on her head was 5,000 gold crowns. Added to Darius's 10,000, their little group was worth a small fortune to anyone willing to collect. But more importantly, Serafina learned that she herself was in immediate danger. Not from bounty hunters, from the crown directly. She had been captured. The informant's message was 3 days old. Lady Voss, taken by Bloodwatch agents, held in the Tower of Silence. Scheduled for public execution in 7 days. Charge: high treason and conspiracy against the crown. Darius read the message twice, then he looked at his companions. She saved my life. She gave up everything to help me. I am going back. Kale nodded, expected nothing less. Mira gripped her staff. I can heal whatever they do to us. Auran stroked his beard. The Tower of Silence has 17 known entrances and 4 that are not known. I know all 21. They reached Kael'thas in 2 days, faster than should have been possible, but Darius discovered that the Sword of Dawn had properties beyond cutting. It could fold distance. Not teleportation exactly, more like convincing the road that 2 points were closer together than they appeared. Velon's magic. Builder's magic. The magic of a king who needed to be everywhere in his kingdom at once. The Tower of Silence stood at the eastern edge of the palace complex, a black spire with no windows below the 50th floor. Auran's unknown entrance was a drainage tunnel that emerged in the tower's basement. They entered at midnight. Kale led, sword drawn, moving with the silence of a man who had spent 15 years learning to kill quietly. Darius followed, suppressing his golden light with everything Serafina had taught him. Mira and Auran brought up the rear. They found Serafina on the 32nd floor, in a cell that suppressed magic, chains on her wrists that burned with anti-mage runes. She looked terrible, bruised, thin, exhausted. But when she saw Darius, she smiled. "Took you long enough," she said. Her voice was hoarse, but her eyes were sharp. "I assume you found the ruins. I assume you remember." Darius gripped the bars of her cell. The metal groaned under his hands. "I remember everything, and I am getting you out of here." The bars did not melt or dissolve. They shattered. Darius's hands blazed gold, and the enchanted iron exploded outward like it was made of glass. The anti-magic chains on Serafina's wrists cracked and fell. The suppression field in the cell flickered and died. Serafina stood, rubbing her wrists, and looked at Darius with an expression he had never seen on her face before. Pride. Pure, uncomplicated pride. "You have grown," she said. 3 weeks ago, you could barely light a candle. Now you are breaking master-level enchantments with your bare hands. Darius shrugged. "I had a good teacher. And 300 years of practice, I just remembered." The alarm triggered on their way out. Of course it did. 30 guards between them and the exit. Elite guards. Bloodwatch operatives in black armor with weapons designed to kill mages. Kale stepped forward. "Sword raised. I will hold them. Go." Darius put a hand on his shoulder. "No. Together. Remember." He drew the Sword of Dawn. It blazed with golden light that filled the corridor like sunrise. The guards hesitated. Just for a moment, but a moment was enough. What followed was not a fight. It was a demonstration. Darius moved through the guards like water through stones. The Sword of Dawn did not kill. It did not need to. Each strike sent a pulse of golden energy that shut down the nervous system. Guards dropped, unconscious, unharmed, but completely incapacitated. 30 men in 40 seconds. Kale, who had been ready to fight to the death, lowered his sword slowly. He had seen many warriors in his 15 years of service. He had never seen anything like this. "That was not combat," Kale said as they ran for the exit. "That was art." They emerged from the tower into the courtyard and found it was not empty. Prince Roderick stood in the center, flanked by 50 of his personal guard. He was in full armor, dawnfire drawn, his golden hair loose around his shoulders, and his face was a mask of controlled fury. "I knew you would come back for her," Roderick said. "Predictable, sentimental, weak, just like the stories say Velon was." Darius stopped. The Sword of Dawn hummed in his hand. Behind him, Serafina, Kale, Mira, and Auran formed up. 5 against 51. The odds were not in their favor, except they were. Darius stepped forward. He did not suppress the light this time. He let it come. Let the gold flood his eyes, the runes trace his skin, the crown manifest above his head. The courtyard lit up like noon in the middle of the night. And he spoke. Not to Roderick, to the guards, to the soldiers, to every person within earshot. "I am Velnathar Auransi, the first king, founder of the 7 kingdoms, betrayed by my own blood 200 years ago. I did not come here for a throne. I came here for my friend. Let us pass. And no one needs to be hurt." Silence. The guards looked at each other, looked at the crown of light, looked at their prince. Roderick's face twisted. "Do not listen to him. He is a fraud, a peasant with a magic trick. Kill him, now." The guards did not move, not because they believed Darius, but because their bodies remembered, the same way Roderick's body had remembered in the arena. The blood of every person in that courtyard carried a trace of Velon's lineage. 300 years of a kingdom built on one man's bloodline meant that almost everyone had a drop of the founder in them, and that drop recognized its source. Roderick screamed in frustration and charged. Alone, dawnfire blazing with borrowed light, he was fast, trained, furious, and it did not matter. Darius raised the Sword of Dawn and met dawnfire in a clash that sent shockwaves across the courtyard. The copy against the original, the descendant against the ancestor, the pretender against the founder. The swords rang together and Dawnfire cracked, a single fracture running from tip to hilt. Because Dawnfire was a copy, a replica made 200 years ago to replace the original that was hidden with Velon's body, and copies cannot stand against originals. Roderick stared at his cracking sword, then at Darius, then at the crown of light above his head, and for the second time, his body betrayed him. His knees buckled. Not fully, he caught himself, fought it. Snarled like an animal against its own instincts. But everyone saw the Prince of the Realm almost kneel to a peasant. Again. "This is not over," Roderick hissed through clenched teeth. "My mother will burn this kingdom to ash before she lets you take it." Darius looked down at him. "I do not want your kingdom, Roderick. I want the truth, and I want to be left alone. But if your family keeps hunting me, keeps killing innocents who carry my blood, keeps building their power on my corpse, then yes, I will come back. And next time, I will not be so gentle." He turned his back on the prince, on 50 guards who parted before him like water, on the Tower of Silence and the palace beyond. He walked out of the courtyard with his companions, the sword of dawn still blazing, the crown still shining. And behind him, in the royal apartments high above, Queen Isolde watched from a darkened window. Her face was stone. Her mind was already moving, already planning. Already reaching out to allies in the other 6 kingdoms. If one kingdom could not stop the first king's return, perhaps 5 could. The road out of Caelthus was quiet this time. No sewers, no sneaking. They walked through the main gate and no one stopped them. The guards at the gate looked at the golden crown, looked at each other, and stepped aside. Word was already spreading through the city. The first king. He came back. He walked right out the front door, and the prince could not stop him. They made camp in the Ashwood Forest, far enough from the city to breathe. Seraphina was weak but recovering. Mira's healing magic worked steadily, knitting bruises and mending what the Blood Watch had damaged. Cale stood watch, though they all knew nothing would attack them tonight. Not with the Sword of Dawn planted in the ground beside their fire, pulsing gently like a lighthouse. Darius sat apart from the others, looking at the stars. Feeling the weight of 300 years of memory settling into a mind that was only 18 years old, Mira came and sat beside him. She did not speak, just placed her hand near his, not quite touching. Her green healing glow mingled with his golden light where their auras overlapped. It was warm, comfortable, like coming home to a place you have never been. "Thank you," Darius said eventually, "for coming with me, for all of this. You barely know me." Mira smiled. "I know enough. I know you broke my cage. I know you never asked me to follow. I know you fight like a king, but you eat bread like a blacksmith." She paused. "And I know that whatever happens next, I would rather face it beside you than alone in a cage." Darius looked at her. At the autumn hair, in the green glowing hands, in the quiet courage that had carried her through slavery and freedom and battle without breaking. He did not say what he felt. It was too soon, too complicated. Too tangled with memories of a life 3 centuries gone. But he smiled, and that was enough. For now. The next morning, Orn spread his maps on a flat stone and briefed them on what was coming. Queen Isolde was not a woman who accepted defeat. She was already sending envoys to the 5 kingdoms, the other major powers that had been independent before Velon united them. Her message was simple. The usurper has returned. He will try to reclaim all 7 kingdoms. Unite against him or fall separately. It was a lie, of course. Darius had no interest in conquest, but fear is a powerful motivator, and Isolde knew how to wield it. Furthermore, the Blood Watch was being expanded, new agents recruited, new resources allocated. The quiet program of elimination was becoming a loud program of war. And there was something else, something Orn had discovered in the memory crystal that troubled him deeply. The curse that bound Velon to the cycle of reincarnation. It was not Aldrich's work. Aldrich was a schemer, a poisoner, a betrayer, but he was not a mage of sufficient power to create a soul-binding curse. Someone else had provided the magic. Someone older. Someone whose name appeared in the oldest records of the Keepers and nowhere else. A name that made Auran's ancient face go pale when he spoke it. But that, Auran said carefully, is a mystery for another time. For now, we must focus on survival, on building strength, on finding others who carry the true blood and protecting them from the Blood Watch. Darius nodded, but he filed that name away, the name of whoever had truly cursed him, whoever had made this eternal cycle of death and rebirth possible. Because someday he would find them, and he would have answers. Dear viewer, this is where Season 1 ends, not with a victory, not with a crown reclaimed, but with a boy who was a king, standing in a forest with 4 companions, a magic sword, and the knowledge that his own great-granddaughter wants him dead. The road ahead is long. The enemies are many. The truth is still buried under 200 years of lies. But Darius Velnathar, who was once Valon Auransi, who was once a blacksmith's son, who was once a dead king walking, is no longer running. He is walking forward, with purpose, with allies, with a light that 2 centuries of darkness could not extinguish, who cursed the first king to return forever. What does Queen Isolde's alliance of 5 kingdoms mean for Darius and his companions? And what happens when the Sword of Dawn meets the full power of a united army? Season 2 is coming. Subscribe to RiseArc, hit the bell, and I will see you when the king walks again.